questions, but let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got here as an author.
Oh, goodness. So I was a stay-at-home mom. I actually have a degree in biology and chemistry. Um, and my senior year, I ended up of college. I ended up getting pregnant with my second daughter. And so my husband's in the military, and I was like, well, I'll just kind of do the stay-at-home mom thing for a little while. And I just ended up getting into reading romance books was always kind of like my escape. And so eventually, like, I kind of started creating these stories in my head, and I was like, why not? I'll just try and write it. And you get to a certain point where you're like, well, I'm not turning back now. I have 15,000 words down, like, and it kind of just took off from there. People ask, they're like, did you always know you wanted to be a writer? I was like, no, I didn't enjoy English class. I mean, I wrote a lot of papers, but it was like scientific papers. So, I mean, it was not what I saw coming, but I'm super excited about it and I love doing it so
Yeah,
much.
I think I saw in your bio, your author bio, that you had those degrees. And I was just like, that is so interesting. It's so funny to see how, like, reading can bring so many people together that are
Oh,
just
yeah.
doing different things.
Yeah. I mean, and I love science. My daughter actually, she's finishing up her junior year of high school. Um, but she was in biology and chemistry. I was like, I've been waiting my life for this.
Well, why don't you give us a summary of Aspen, which is what we're talking about tonight?
Yes, so Aspen is you actually see her for the first time in Blame It on the Tequila, which is a rock star romance. And in there she is the band's manager, and you get her father owns the company. And so we kick off with her at this point of finding out that her father, who is much older, is retiring, and so he doesn't like want her to be like locked into this company so young. So he's like, I'm just going to sell off part of it and still leave the option for you to have the majority, and you can still work the company, you can still run the company. But she's like, absolutely not. This is my company. I want all of it. And enter in Lucian, he's got his own company of acquisitions and investments and stuff. And there's this immediate, like, she hates him because he is representing this loss of something she's worked her whole life for. And he hates her because he has bad experience, and he's like, you're just a spoiled little princess. Um, and it kind of, they're forced to interact and work with each other while they're figuring this out. And she's like, oh, I'm going to make sure I get majority of this company. And he's like, I hate you, so I'm going to make sure you don't. But then they kind of find this like connection with each other. Aspen has these moments where she's very tight and like in control, and she doesn't like to let go. But she's also kind of like desperate for it because she just, it builds up in like a pressure pot. And Lucian is like a dominant in a club kind of thing. I like to call the books like BDSM light. Nothing like too much like whips and chains or anything, but spanking for sure. And he kind of just like, when she's like in a tirade, he kind of just like, I'm just gonna bend you over and spank you because you're acting like a child. And she's like, oh, I should hate that, but also like, yes. like, and so we kind of learn that Lucian ends up having these needs that he needs help with, and she also wants to do anything she can to keep the company, and they kind of come up with this. They find ways to work with each other.
So, where did you get the inspiration for this book? Did you know when you were writing the other one that she was going to have her own book?
No, no, not even a little bit. And it's funny because I planned on writing the band from Blame It on the Tequila next, and I actually was about halfway through one of the books, and I was just like, I just had this hankering for this like hate to love romance, and I had this scene, like, there'll be a scene that kind of inspires it, and like the spanking scene was such a big one for me, and I was like, I just want to write this so bad. And so I was like, but who can I like bring this in with? And I remembered Aspen, and like her, she's a very strong character. Um, and so she was perfect for it.
Well, I love it. I think that I love to see how um, authors can take characters that they never really, that were just kind of not fillers, but just there to move a story along, and then they're suddenly like, you've got a whole new life to you.
That was every book I wrote in the Voyeur series. I just kept writing. I was like, well, okay, I guess this person's gonna get a story now. And I don't recommend it. Because in Lovers, that's how I ended up with Jake and Jackson. And it's a testament to my editor that that book came out and I didn't swap their names somehow, like, or they were all caught. So,
So, so how do you approach writing multiple points of view?
you know, it's funny because like I remember I ended up at one point I wrote this chapter and I originally wrote it in the female character's point of view, and I was like, if you would have asked me before then, I would have been like, I don't know, I guess they just have the same writer's voice, you can't really tell the difference. And I'm like, but trying to switch those two from female to male, I was like, okay, no, they're very different. And I think it's the work I put in before I start writing to kind of discover these characters. I do a lot of personality research and really kind of try to understand them as characters. That it kind of, when I get in their headspace, it just kind of comes out as that. And the first three books I wrote were not dual point of view. And I'm like, I can't imagine going back to not doing that. That's, I just can imagine not writing it that way anymore.
I mean, I personally always prefer dual POV because it just feels so rich.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan. Without giving too much away here, we learned that Aspen, her relationship with like intimacy is pretty tainted by a past trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, Lucian kind of helps her with this and helps her like discover some stuff about herself that she doesn't really have awareness of. So I would love to know more about why you think it's important to write sex positive stories where people, especially women, have pleasure without shame.
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it's, I think as a woman, we have that stigma against this and everything. And Aspen has that stigma for a complexity of reasons. And I just think it's so important to show more to what a sexual romance can be. Um, Rather than just, I mean, we all love the spicy scenes, right? But like, I always say, I'm like, it's got to move the story forward somehow. And how is this building this character more? And I think that's, it's pulling it in to build up this character. And I think if nothing else, romances, I mean, we should have as little shame as possible, because some of the things are, we're like, do I like this? Like, I'm confused. Do I want to be slapped? Like, but I think it's a great way to just explore and think about it, and like, no judgment for whatever it is.
And Lucian, he's introduced as a really unlikable character because obviously, we're seeing him from Aspen's point of view. And as the story moves on, we learn more about his depth and really his own like trauma that kind of keeps him from trying to make connections and just kind of gives him that like gruff attitude. So, why did you want to tell the story of like this dominating alpha male that has a range of emotions?
I think it was, once again, I kind of just had this craving. Like, I kept like coming up with, like, I would stop. My mind is always going, maybe I listen to a song or I kind of just build it off. Or even if I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh, I want to write something like this, but this. And I had this character in mind that I wanted to write him in a way that readers would be like, do I hate him? I think I hate him. Like, I can't believe he just said that. But like, still be like interested to read more about him, But it's more than just writing that. You have to, I feel like, once again, exploring the character of the reason why, how did we get here? And that's usually kind of like what gets me into a book this big, is I have a scene where I'm like, I just want him to be like a huge butthole, And then I'm like, okay, but why? And then all of a sudden, like, this explosion of personality and reasons around it comes, and you're like, okay. Like, I wrote Falter, which was an extended novella for Liar. And I wrote it because I just wanted to write this one really raunchy sex scene. Like, that's all I wanted. And I was like, I'm just going to use this established character. And then it ended up turning into like 30,000 words. It ended up being so intense because I was like, but why is that? How are we? I was like, so there's just, I think I just ask why and I want to understand and give a lot of reason and justification behind it.
Well, this book does include some heavy topics, grief, anxiety, other things I'm not going to give away, but I want to know more about how you navigate writing heavy content while keeping, care and sensitivity like at the forefront of the story.
I think, and I kind of approach these topics. I mean, I'm very familiar with anxiety and those kinds of things. So I think bringing awareness to that and showing like a realistic side of that um, is important. But I mean, some of these topics that are hard to just talk about, read about, write about, I like to go with the emotions of it rather than like actually graphically showing things. So we get kind of like the effects of it rather than this, I don't want to say gratuitous, but sometimes I mean it can be, where you're yanking at heartstrings in an easier way. So I like to really show kind of the after effects, I guess, or the ripple that happens afterwards from it.
Well, I think that you do a great job, and it's always so intriguing to me to find out kind of how people dive into that kind of stuff because it can be difficult. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Did you know, and this is one of my like, oh no! Did you know this was going to end on a
Yeah.
cliffhanger?
Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. I had a TikTok that I made and it was I have a daughter, two daughters, so we watched Moana, and there's like a scene where she's like, "Their boats are turning into more boats," and I used that, but I was like, "The chapters are turning into more chapters," and I mean, 100%, it just kept getting so long, and I've never written like a cliffhanger in any way, shape, or form. So trying to figure out how to end this in a way that like made sense, it was very difficult. Because I had to rethink the book too, because I'm already halfway through this book, and when I decided it has to be split into two, but the structure of it changes. Because I'm writing it as if you're going to get this all at once, and all of a sudden I have to look at like this build up and kind of be like, okay, it needs its own fluctuation. So it was not by choice, guys. I promise. It was not. I have ADHD. I like to finish things. Wrap it up. Like
Well, that kind of piggybacks onto my next question, which was how much did the story change from initial conception to final edits? And it sounds like just based on the cliffhanger alone, it had to change some. Were there any other big specific things that you felt like changed a lot?
so I'm a big plotter, like huge. I go in with my best intention to plot, but I mean sometimes I like to do a quick plot with like postcards and things like that. And then sometimes they end up being more in depth. And then sometimes I'm like, mad argue. And I'm like, Matt, what? Mad argue what? Like, what did I mean by that? So it can expand on those chapters. Mad argue turned into like three chapters. um,
Fair.
so one of the biggest changes in this is that they actually hadn't slept together. Um, and I was like, I can't publish a book without them sleeping together. I was like, even though they've done, there's lots of other activities going on in this book. Lots of, it's not missing any of the spice in it, but I definitely felt the need to change that up. And then kind of just address the transition in the end, because even then, I actually created a special edition of this for signings at Book Bonanza, and I had started writing Lucian's book, and then finally I was like, I can't do this. This is all getting so long. I was like, we're just gonna slap this that I've written into Aspen, so it's even different than the version it was a year ago. So it's longer than I originally planned. Even when I was going to split it up, it got longer again. And just kind of have to adjust the ending a little bit to make a cliffhanger because I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to do.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Well, if readers could only take away one thing from this story, this first story in what I'm assuming is a duology duet,
Yes.
what
Yes.
would it be?
Um, it's definitely like a spicy. It's definitely got the hate to love. You're not gonna love the characters all the time, but it's definitely got a lot of emotion in it and it's a lot of build up, a lot of tension.
I mean, you mentioned already, I'm kind of pivoting here away from the story, but you mentioned that you're a plotter. What else do you have with your writing process that is just like, this is definitely what I do?
So I always start with I've actually got it right here because I was writing Lucian's story earlier. So I have one of these, just a composition notebook, for every single book I start, and I write their names. And then I have these, it's a positive and negative trait thesaurus, and I will flip through them, and anything that kind of makes me think of a character, I'll put it down. And just going through them, it makes me go, well, are they antagonistic? Are they stubborn? Are they workaholic? Um, and I might have like a list of like, I mean, I can show you. I have a list of like 20 things on here, you know? And then I'll go through and I'll pick 3 to 5 of each that are like the key ones. So I do that to really build it up. And then, like I said, I go through, I have like a program with postcards, and those certain scenes that maybe sparked it, I'll write those in and then try to fill in the gaps. So once I do that, then I go back and I like to do like an in-depth plot before I write, where I'll kind of hit some conversation beats and like some feelings. Um, I'm trying to make it speedier because I like to do that by hand. But I've tried something new with this, and I'm using voice to text um, while driving, which has turned into a lot of weird dictation notes. And I've started sharing them on my social media where because I'm like, I'm just going to record myself reading these dictation notes before I go in because I can see it's going downhill and I want to see where it goes. And I have a Midwestern accent. So I think at one point I was like, when he said ass, and I was like, what? And I meant us. um, I think it was one thing, it was like hearing his mom on my back. And I was like, what is happening? So it's a different process, but I'm enjoying it. But yeah, once I do that, then I go back through and I'll write it out. It makes my writing process go a lot faster. So those are my plotting and preparation notes.
So you typically write by hand, like your prep stuff. What do
Yes.
you use any sort of specific like tools or devices for actually writing the story? Like, do you just use your notes app?
Um, I no, I was using Scrivener. That's my note card one that I really like to use. So I'll use that. Otherwise, I'll use Microsoft Word. Um, it kind of is just like whatever I have up on my computer. I'm now where I'm actually home more. And I have an office, so feel very fancy. But for like the first 12 of my books, my daughter was in competitive gymnastics, so I did a lot of it on my laptop or in my car or my laptop. I never had a desktop, I was younger, but on my laptop, and that was where I used Scrivener a lot of the time. But otherwise, I use the voice dictation in on my phone, and that's nothing fancy.
Whatever works, it gets the job done.
Yes.
What is one piece of advice you have for writers and aspiring authors?
Um, One, I know it's the most annoying thing to hear, but just keep writing. Like, if a book doesn't do great, you just got to keep writing. That's the best way. You just got to keep putting more and more books out there, and eventually, like, it'll help out. But probably the biggest one is write what you want to read. Like, write what you want, the book that you want. I don't recommend, I mean, yes, you can try and pull at trends and things like that, of course. But I think however the book does, great or horrible, no matter what, you're happy with the book, because that would be really crappy. Like if you were like, your book tanked and you're like, well, I wonder if it was the way I wanted to write it. If it was the story I wanted to tell, would it have been better? So,
Well, what is next for you?
so I've already been working on Lucian's book. So of course, the pre-order is up for that in November, but the goal is to hopefully try and get it done earlier. Like I said, I am a mom. I have two girls, and summer is coming up. So, and I don't have a lock on my office door. So we're gonna make sure that works. That's what's up next, is to make sure there's a lock on my door. But definitely Lucian next.
Perfect. So how many do you like, what's your average that you write and publish per year, would you say?
Well, okay. Well, so it's actually, this is the first full-length book I've published in 3 years. But I did a lot of like novellas in between and everything. Just life, you know. But usually I try to publish. I usually was publishing about 2 books a year. The goal was always three, still is. You know, got to strive for something. But about 2 books a year is usually about how it pans out and everything.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, that is not an easy thing to do. And I don't even like people that do one a year. I don't know how they're doing it. So,
Listen, this is the hardest part for me, is like I enjoy it so much. Like I'm having so much fun right now. I think you're amazing. But it's like I'm like doing outside of writing is like, all right, we're gonna go a month. And I'm going to go out. So, but it's always exciting when you're doing it. I mean, I love every aspect of writing and publishing, and I, as much as social media is exhausting, I absolutely love it so much. It's so much fun, and I love talking to other people.
well, I am so glad that you joined me tonight. I don't have one of the beautiful books to hold up, so I'll let you do that. Yes, Aspen, everyone should read it. It is, I mean, I just feel like you should be warned that there is a cliffhanger, but it's a good one.
Yes.
Um, but thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that we can chat when Lucian comes out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I had so much fun. By the way, you look gorgeous, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you.
You're
Thank you so much.
welcome.
Well, you have a great night, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.